When people hear tales about knights slaying dragons, what they don't realise is that they are in fact immortal. They live for thousands and thousands of years and only die when they choose to. Just at the right time, they give up their own lives. Often a brave and gallant knight is sent to slay the dragon just at this time, and so easily kills the ancient lizard and becomes a hero. The truth is, the dragon chose to die then and join its brothers and sisters in the heavens. Now my story begins many thousands of years ago, in a place many thousands of miles away. There was a dragon who has come to be known as the ridgeworm, but in those days he had no name. In those days, he was part of a great and sandy landscape, which is now known as the Gobi Desert. That's in Mongolia, on the edge of modern China. All the dragons in the world had to spread their wings and fly high up in the sky to escape the ice which was creeping over the surface of the earth. And the ridgeworm was no exception. For years and years, he flew way up in the sky over the frozen wastes, using the fires in his soul to keep aloft and alive. Eventually, the ridgeworm felt a change in the air and knew that the ice age was coming to an end. Would there be somewhere to rest? Somewhere to sleep and rest those aching wings? The ridgeworm looked down, but all he could see was the harsh, sparkling ice. And so he flew further and further west, looking for somewhere to rest. He was now leaving Asia and flying over Europe, but still all he could see below him was the harsh ice. And yet now it was beginning to melt. The further west he flew, the more he could see of the ice thinning and cracking, until eventually he made it to the British Isles. And as he flew, he could see the land showing beneath the ice. But it was too hard, too rocky. He needed somewhere smooth to land. And then he saw it, the Cheshire Plain, which had been carved out of the ground by the great glaciers of the Ice Age. A plain which was so vast that even the ridgeworm, with his great snaking body, would be able to stretch and rest. And so he descended and landed there in the plain, with his head by the sea and his great long body reaching out into the land. And now the Ice Age was at an end, so life was back in the earth, and flowers and grass started to appear, even on the back of the ridgeworm. Grass and flowers and thorny bushes and twisty trees. And as one spring followed another, so the back of the ridgeworm, his sandy, stony back, was coloured and made beautiful. And the animals began to live on his back as well. They could find homes deep in the nooks and crannies made by his arms and legs, and under his wings, and of course in the hollows made by those twisting trunks and roots of the trees which now grew ever stronger on the sandstone ridge of the ridgeworm. As season followed season, so the lands became more fertile, and humans started to gather here. They were amazed at the wide, open spaces, the great Cheshire Plain. Here they could farm their animals and grow their crops, but they were even more pleased to discover the ridgeworm. They could climb up onto his back and see for miles and miles. And so they came to live here, in the shadow of the ridgeworm's protection. But not only was the ridgeworm giving them shelter, he was also able to give them wisdom from his many, many thousands of years. And so the ridgeworm was happy, happy to be a protector, happy to live in peace. Over the years, tales of the ridgeworm spread all over the land. People spoke in wonder of the peaceful folk who lived on the back of a dragon, learning from its ancient wisdom. And the tales spread across the sea to a giant who lived in the land of Ireland. The giant wasn't very much liked, and he was jealous of the ridgeworm. Why was such a great creature allowing people to sit on his back? Surely he had been a great ridgeworm at one time. Why wasn't he roaring and ripping through the land and scaring these puny humans? The giant came striding through the Irish Sea in search of this enigmatic creature. He waded along the coasts of Northern Ireland until he came to the Wirral, and then he climbed out of the waters and stood face to face with the ridgeworm. He raised his great jagged sword above his head and challenged the creature to a fight. The ridgeworm opened its deep blue eyes and looked at the giant. With a sigh, it closed its eyes. "Ha!" said the giant. "This creature is naught but a coward." And with one enormous sweep of his sword, the giant struck off the head of the dragon. "Ha! How easy," laughed the giant. "What kind of dragon was this anyway?" And he took hold of the ridgeworm's head and threw it up into the sky. It span way, way through the clouds as the giant's laughter rang across the plain. Where the head landed, the giant doesn't know. But now, there was nothing more for him to do, and so he headed back to Ireland, where he could terrorize the people again. But now, with life no longer flowing through the dragon's veins, his body began to harden, making it harder to live and to survive. That long dragon's body hardened into one long sandstone ridge. And the people's hearts began to harden too. They began to blame one another, to fear one another. Peace had disappeared from the ridgeworm because of the giant's actions. This is when all the wars and the battles began. Hill forts and castles replaced farmhouses and cottages. The Romans subdued the Britons. The English fought to suppress the Welsh. And the Roundheads and the Cavaliers were locked in greedy combat. The lands around this ridge saw all of these battles. But despite all the fighting, some folk did manage to live in harmony. They tilled the land and worked in the mines, in the caves. They were married, had families, and gathered together as friends to sing songs and tell their tales of peace. You see, they had found something. The dragon's head that the giant had thrown up into the sky, it had landed on the ridge, hidden away, waiting. And they say that those who look at the dragon's face, who search with care and look closely and see that face of the serene friend, the ridgeworm, they will be able to tell stories to one another and so build a world of harmony and peace. Can you see a dragon's face? Is it the head of the ridgeworm? Is that why it's called raw head?